Hey everybody, it's Nate Hale from Rapscallion Brigade, and we're going to do a little bit of a special opening stages today. I just got my SNES Classic yesterday, and I've played through some of the games. Just about every game on there is awesome. So if you haven't gotten one of these, I suggest you round one up if you like the Super Nintendo or if you like that era of gaming. These are some of the best from that time period, and I don't think you can go wrong with any game on this SNES Classic. But I thought that we might go through the opening stage of Star Fox and then the opening stage of Star Fox 2. And one reason I thought about doing both of them is that when you first turn your SNES Classic on, Star Fox 2 is locked, or rather wrapped as a present. And the only way to unwrap it or unlock it is to defeat the first stage of Star Fox. And then you'll see in a second, once we're finished with the first stage of Star Fox, we can back out to the menu, and we can go over to Star Fox 2, and it'll unwrap it for us. I remember that when Star Fox first came out, I didn't get it. I had a friend that had it, and he just had to have. He called me up and he said, "You got to come over. You got to see this game." And this is, this is before we all had our PlayStations or N64s, and even though the 3D graphics, the polygons on like the PS1 are rudimentary. I mean, this here is even before that. And while the 2D sprites on the Super Nintendo are amazing, you can see here how much it struggles to pump out these 3D graphics. But thanks to that Super FX chip, it managed to pull it off. And I know this looks horrible by today's standards, but this is one of the first times we had on a console that feeling of being in a 3D space, even though it's very simplistic and like I said, by today's standards, you probably wouldn't want to play it for very long. But I will say this: if you go back to Star Fox or Star Fox 2, if you spend some time playing the game, I don't know what it is. I don't know if your mind will just forget about how amazing graphics are today, or if you just eventually get used to it. But I've done this before on the Nintendo 64. The more time you spend playing some of those early 3D games, it seems like the better the graphics begin to look. And I guess it's because you're kind of settling back into it, and you haven't come fresh off of seeing one of these new 4K games, and it's almost like it begins to look a little better over time. I don't know if it's just that you get used to it or what, but it gets to where you kind of settle in, and it doesn't look so bad. I mean, it's not as good as it could be, and it's nowhere near the level of the detail that we have in games today, but it's enough to put you in that world, even though, like I said, it's very simplistic. You see everything's really blocky. The buildings really have no detail. There's no texture on the ground. You see the little dots that they added there to kind of just to help you see or perceive which direction you're moving or where the ground is. And everything is just big triangles, it seems like. The ship, the R-Wing, is just looks like it's been looks like it's been just crafted or glued together out of paper almost. And then even the lasers that you're shooting is kind of the same shapes. There's a pretty good variety of enemies just in this first stage. And like I said, even though everything's very simple, it's good enough to enjoy it. And when you think of what it took for them to get this to work on the Super Nintendo. Or when you imagine yourself going from two-dimensional games and then being able to play this. When we first started with these 3D games, I mean, it didn't have to be very detailed. Just the fact that we were in the world was a big deal to us. And I've seen some of the reviews that have come out for the Star Fox 2, and yeah, it's true. Some of the things they say is that if you want to give it a mediocre review score, I mean that's understandable. If you're going by today's standards, obviously it's not really very good. But when you take into account the time period in which these games were released, and the power or lack of power of the Super Nintendo, and what they managed to pull off on that system, I think that in itself would bump the review score up. This final boss of this first stage is fairly easy, and I haven't played these games in years, so you could probably see I'm not really very good at them, and part of that is the controls. Like nothing is as fluid. Today the games are so fluid, the controls are so tight that when you go back to some of these older games, it's hard to control because it's not as tight, and everything is a little bit jerky. And sometimes it's hard to, when today you're used to a joystick, or like me, I play a lot of VR games. I'm used to everything being so intuitive that you go from that joystick and that fluid control, analog control, back to the D-pad on the Super Nintendo controller. It makes a big difference. Here's us opening up Star Fox 2 after we beat the first stage of Star Fox. It gives us the opportunity then to play Star Fox 2. Star Fox 2 is a little different. There's not really one opening stage. You have kind of your choice of where you want to go, and you'll see that in just a second. You open up to this map, and the enemies are attacking your home planet, and you kind of have to choose how to defend it, or where to go, or what order to take them out in. So there's not really the stage that I play here. You might do it a little differently when you get to play through it. And so we're actually going to do a few things. We'll go through just the first little part of the game. It won't be exactly what you might do. You might choose a different strategy, and you would probably, if you played this game at all and practice it very much, you'd probably be a lot better than I am for this playthrough. But you can see our home planet there. We've got to defend it. We've got missiles coming in. We've got the enemies trying to get into position to attack, and we're getting our orders here, what we've got to do. It's a neat premise. Instead of just going through one stage after another, you kind of get to choose how you want to take it on. And as he's explaining there, you don't want that number on the left. You don't want that number to get to 100%. You want to be able to defend your planet. And this game is a little different. If you choose the normal or easiest setting, the game is shorter. So you might feel, if you play it on the very easiest setting, you might feel like, well, there wasn't much game to that. But that's because you chose easy. If you go to the harder settings, there's much more game to play. A lot more battles that you'll have to go through. This game looks so good for the time in which it was developed, much like the first Star Fox. I think this one was refined even a little more. And you probably already know this, but Star Fox 2 wasn't released because the Nintendo 64 was so close on the horizon, and Nintendo decided to shelve Star Fox 2. And now here we are in 2017 with an official release. Now the ROM's been floating around for years, but it's not the official version, and it's been kind of hacked to be able to be playable and to make it what could have been a finished product, but it wasn't the official Nintendo version. And so it's not very often that you I say not very often. I don't know if there's ever been a time where you have a game that just was shelved, decided they would never release it, and then years later the company decides, okay, we're going to officially release it. Now there's some games that have been leaked over the years. I've played a few of the versions of different games that got canceled, but they were far enough along that you could actually play through them or play most of them. I've played some of those, but I don't know if I ever remember a company just saying, here's this game from over 20 years ago that we're gonna bring it back. We're gonna officially release it. Of course, this is a very peculiar situation with the SNES Classic. What a perfect storm for them to be able to bring this game to market in 2017. Now we cleared that little stage, but that's not exactly all of the opening stage. You're going to see we're going to do a few things here, and then we'll actually get to the first little boss section after we choose a few different battles. I'm racing to attack that missile, and I didn't get there in time, so they actually hit us. So we're 10% damage already. I'm doing horribly. Our satellite took out that missile. See if we can intercept this one. All right. It takes a little getting used to when you go back to these older games, and this is some of the very earliest 3D space combat right here. And so you have to get used to this going back to it. You watch a video of the new Star Wars Battlefront 2 coming out, and some of the space battles in it, and then you go back and try to play this, and it's night and day. It's hard to it's all so grainy, and you have to really get used to it before you can. Okay, here's our first boss of the game, if you want to call it that. This would be the end of this opening stage if it was opening stage. We go intercept him. It didn't last very long. But I do have a wingman, so I'm going to be able to continue with my wingman, and we'll see if we can take care of this boss. And I'm playing on one of the easier settings, so I may be having an easier time than if I were to play on hard or the expert settings. I appreciate so much you taking the time to watch this video and listen to me ramble on about some random things. I hope you get the opportunity to get your hands on an SNES Classic if you're looking for one, and I guarantee you have some fun with it. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you again real soon.